Peace, family. How you doing? It's Mr. R2 here at Consistency is Currency, your morning podcast of choice. Um, Today is October the 25th. I would like to say good morning to everybody that's watching on Instagram. I added today. Everybody that's watching on Instagram, those who may be viewing on Facebook Live, those who may be viewing on YouTube Live, and those that's going to catch the replay on the podcast distribution. Like always, I like to always start and say good morning, and I appreciate you. And again, for everybody that's watching on Instagram, I thank you and good morning. And I pray that your morning will be blessed, and I pray that the rest of your day will be blessed as well. So if you ever want to watch it live, I'm talking to Instagram, Facebook. Hold on. For everybody that's watching it live right now on Instagram, if you ever want to watch it on YouTube, just go to Consistency is Currency YouTube, and you'll be able to watch it to where you can see exactly what we're communicating about. All right. So everybody on the Facebook, again, good morning and peace to you. Um, so today we're talking about leveraging your potential. Peace. Good morning. We're talking about leveraging your potential, and leveraging your potential is really like a self-proclaimed moment, right? Because as you speaking to yourself, that's you acknowledging the gift that you have inside of you, that's you acknowledging um, the very raw nature that you have buried so deep inside of you that only you can actually bring that out and bring it to fruition. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I don't want to be on long, but I do want to be intentional. Uh, be intentional with today's message on Consistency is Currency. Again, like always, your podcast of choice. Um, so let's go ahead and jump into it with today's message. We're talking about leveraging your potential. And as you can see, those is watching it on Facebook, the question that's proposed, and those who may be watching it on Instagram, the question that is proposed right now is, have you leveraged your potential? That's an open question. Have you leveraged your potential? If you haven't leveraged your potential, I'd rather you say no. I'd rather you identify that, because a lot of times when things are identified, that's where our inner convictions take over. And when we have those inner convictions, what do? We want to do something about it. We want to fix it. We want to bring about a correction. Like I always say, without conviction, there will be no correction. And without that conviction and not having the ability or exposing yourself to the vulnerability of correction, your convictions will only allow you to subside. But now, when you bring that conviction and you correct it, there's a newness that's going to take place. So let's go ahead and talk deep dive again. For those who may be new to the platform, when I say red over white, that means I want you to focus on the words that are in red. If I say white over red, I want you to focus on the words that are in white. And let's go ahead and jump into it. Of course, you're going to get definitions of words. And I don't have any etymologies today, but you will have definition of words so you can understand exactly what we are communicating about. From an intellectual standpoint as well, too. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So it says the definition of leverage. It says the exertion of force by means of a lever or an object used in the manner of a lever. So what I want you to pay attention to right now is white over red. So that means pay attention to the words that are in white. So it says the words that are in white is the exertion of force by means or in manner. The exertion of force by means or in manner. Like, what are you talking about, Mr. R2? Now, that force that you have that's inside of you, we're talking about that potential. So the exertion of force by means or in manner. By means is an action by which a result is brought about. It is a method, like it is a method of doing things. Leveraging your potential is a method. Leveraging the potential can actually bring about a action that can create a different result. Again, just talking in definition, the exertion of force by means, by something that you do, not something that somebody else is doing, but something that you do. And when it says or in manner, what is manner? Manner is a way in which a thing is done or happens. But a lot of time we only exert force, or we only leverage our potential only based on what somebody else's potential is. And that doesn't make it fair for you. And it doesn't even make it right for you when you leverage somebody else's potential. Like, you don't have it for yourself, but you do. Because remember, when we're talking about manner is a way in which a thing is done. Now, when you do it your way, doesn't it make it feel that much more rewarding? Kind of like what we spoke about yesterday. The reward is waiting for you. But when are you going to actually do the work to get the reward? When are you going to actually reach up and pull down and exert that force and leverage the gift that you naturally have inside of you in order for you to reap the benefits of the reward? And it's not you wanting somebody else to do it, but it's you wanting you to do the work. Because when you do the work, don't you know that's where the experience lies? That's where the lessons is learned. That's where the obstacles is able to be defeated, because you have leveraged the experience and have learned from the experience that you just got finished getting over. And now when that potential is set in, it allows you to learn that much more, because that was something that you have done for you and that you have created for yourself. And the second definition of leverage, it says that the power to influence a person or situation to achieve a particular outcome. The power to influence a person or situation to achieve a particular outcome. And the inversion that I want you to pay attention to is red over white, which is the power to influence to achieve a particular outcome. So now, what does that mean for you? The power to influence to achieve a particular outcome. That means that if I can be as influential to myself, then I will achieve a particular outcome that I desire to have. Because not every influence that influences you is something that is going to be beneficial to you. And I'm going to say that again. Not every influence that influences you is going to be beneficial to you. So in order for you to achieve a particular outcome, you're going to have the power to influence yourself. You're going to have to develop the energy to influence yourself. You're going to have the leverage to influence yourself if you're ever going to want to have a particular outcome. Because that outcome is yours. The outcome is something that you desire. Not only do you desire it for yourself, but you also desire it for the end state. You desire that thing that you have buried so deep inside of you that you want to accomplish it even the more, because you know that you can influence yourself to do bigger, better, and greater. And that's leverage. And the third definition of leverage, it talks about, now I like this definition of leverage because it's really coming from a financial standpoint, but it's something that I want you to pay attention to that you have for yourself. Because it said the definition of leverage is used borrow capital for expecting the profits made to be greater than the interest payable. So now let's flip this. Let's flip this into our natural life and into our natural leverage. So the inversion is white over red, which is used borrow capital expecting to be greater than the interest. So what's borrowed capital? Borrowed capital, intellectual capital, emotional capital, right? Capacity is capital, but you're also expecting to be greater than the interest. It's like I have an interest in starting a business, or I have an interest in getting my credit straight, or I have an interest in getting this work done. But you are going to have a greater expectation than the interest that you have and borrow from the power that you have within. Peace. Good morning from Atlanta. You're going to have to borrow from the capital that you have within. Like, where does your expectations lie? It has to be greater than your interest, right? Because you can have great interest and piss poor, what's the word? You can have a greater interest, but piss poor initiatives. It won't get done, right? It won't get done because you have more words than you have of action. So that's why it says expecting to be greater than the interest. Move past your words. Move past the compliments that you have achieved and borrow on that capital, because the accomplishments that you have achieved, when are you going to leverage that accomplishment? Like, you got somebody that go and they get certified for one thing, but until they have leveraged the information that they have learned or borrowed from that intellectual capital to create a book or to create courses or to even speak life into somebody else, you're going to have to borrow from that capital and have high expectations greater than the interest that you have. So now let's talk about potential, right? Let's talk about potential, because potential, it says having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future. So the inversion that I want you to pay attention to is white over red. So what does white over red say? So white over red, it says having the capacity to become. That's potential. Having the capacity to become. Because remember previously when we talked about leverage, we said it was borrowed capital. So if leverage is borrowed capital, then have you borrowed from your capital to leverage the capacity to become? And if you haven't really tapped into your full potential. Because this is saying having the capacity to become. Now, when you look at the word having, that means what? You have what? Assumed the responsibility of holding it and creating it and nurturing it and manifesting it. Because if it is something that you have, is something that you can identify with. Having the capacity to become. Have you leveraged your potential? Sometimes that's a question that's easier said, or that question is easier asked than done, because a lot of times we don't see our potential. We haven't acknowledged the natural potential that we have, because we're possibly waiting for somebody else to identify it, or possibly waiting for somebody else to give life to it, or recognize it. Like, I don't need you to recognize my potential. I need to recognize my potential. Because when I recognize my potential, then I know how much power that I have to change me. I don't need to have power to change you, because you have to have the power to change yourself. You have to have the capacity to change yourself. You have to have the wherewithal to do what? Change yourself. And the next definition of potential, I just loved it because it was different, and I want you to check it out too. So in the definition of potential, like, I couldn't even do an inversion on this because it just hit on so many different cylinders. So from the Collins Dictionary, potential, it says, the definition of potential is that has power or potent, that can but has not, come into being, possible, latent, unrealized, undeveloped. That's potential. Now, how many of us can really recognize ourselves in this definition? Because remember, it says that has power. If that's you, that's you. Say, I have power. If it's potent, then that's you. My potential is potent. You say that because I know my potential is potent. Because when your potential is potent, then when you walk into the room, that's how you become magnetic. That's how you attract certain things based off of your potent potential. People can see it, they can identify it. But then it goes into the other side, because potential does have two sides to it. Potential can even tap into your intuition, right? To say, you know what? That has potential of going wrong. Like, I don't feel like I should be in that space because it could potentially go left real quick. So I don't need to have this conversation with you. That's you using your natural abilities of intuition to tap into the potential that you have inside of you. But that's when you know that what your potential is potent. But again, it also says that can. But in order for something to can, that means what? You have to identify it. Because remember, the other definition, it says having. Having means it has been identified. But then it says, but has not yet. Like, where are you at? It said has not yet. How many of us have yet to understand that we have potential? Stop waiting for someone to identify that inside of you. That is something that you're going to have to identify inside of you, because it's your potential. That's potential that you have to assume. Not neglect, but assume the responsibility of the potential that you have. And when you assume the responsibility of the potential that you have, then the next thing that you're going to have to do is leverage it. You're going to have to leverage your potential. And when you leverage your potential, it does what? It becomes potent. It becomes the energy in the room. It becomes the access to your gifts. Because what if potential was a door only opened by those who understand what access is needed to assume that responsibility? Because remember, when we talked about leverage, we're talking about borrowed capital, having access to your acknowledging your emotions, having access to your intellectual property, having access to your very own intellect. Like, let me borrow from the experiences that I have, and let me leverage that experience in order for me to create an outcome that then becomes a lot more achievable for me, because I've leveraged my experience. So let's go ahead and take this deep dive. Then after this deep dive, we're gonna go ahead and end it for today, for the moment, right? But you're still gonna leverage your potential to carry you throughout the day. because we all have strengths, right? If you can identify that, say, I have strength, because you do. Because we all have strengths, true statement, and we all have weaknesses, true statement. Or if you don't want to call it weaknesses, we all have things that we're not so good at. How about that? Is that better? Is that better? We all have things that we're not so good at. But just like every person in the world, we all have the ability to exude our potential. But the few people intentionally take advantage of their potential. So have you taken advantage of your potential? If you haven't taken advantage of your potential, maybe you need to take and acknowledge that you have to assume that responsibility, that if I'm ever going to get where I strive to go, if I'm ever going to get to the moment where I become, I must acknowledge the potential that I have inside me. So imagine the impact that you can have in your life, you can have somebody else's life. Only if you leverage your potential. Don't you know that somebody is waiting for your gift to be exposed to you in order for you to be a blessing to somebody else? Everybody's gift can be potent. Everyone's talent can be potent. Everyone's like Speaks, I think that Speaks? Yeah. Speaks 254 says shortcomings. Everyone has shortcomings, but what if you have overcome your shortcomings? Because once you have overcome your shortcomings, and now that experience that you have gained after you have overcome your shortcomings, or after you have leaped over the obstacles, and now the obstacle have become an opportunity for you to foresee that in somebody else. So now you leverage that. That's what I mean when I'm saying leveraging your potential. Leveraging and identifying your potential. Because one thing that we have to do is you can't leverage what you're not aware of. I'm gonna say it again. You cannot leverage what you are not aware of. Because you have to be aware and identify your potential. Because when I identify what my potential is, then I have the ability to leverage it. Like, what do you mean from your potential? Like, you can't borrow capital from something that you do not give yourself access to. So as I learn how to speak to me, as I learn how to love me, as I learn how to acknowledge when I'm not feeling so strong, don't you know when you acknowledge those things about you, it helps you to be able to communicate with other people? That's because you learn from your experience and allow that to leverage how to communicate with somebody else, because you can say, I don't want you to feel like I felt. So I want to make it better for you because I've made it better for me. And I want to teach you how to make it better for you so that you can one day leverage your own potential. And that's what is going to make it better. Like, what are you good at? What are the things that you know that you're better at that can be tapping into your potential? Like those natural things that you excel at, that's kind of like your gifts, right? So if you can leverage by identifying what your gifts are, then you have the ability to take those gifts and expose those gifts to more opportunities. And when you expose those gifts to more opportunities, don't you know that you become a blessing like 10 times over? Because you have leveraged the potential that you have. So I went to a play this past weekend, and in this play, at the end, the director was talking about potential. This is kind of where this came from. Was talking about potential, and as I was standing there, and everybody else was just standing around, and they were communicating about he was communicating about potential, and it's like something sparked, and like my potential, the definition of potential just began to switch for me. And what I said was, faith is the compound interest of potential. Now, I want you to look at it from this perspective. How is faith the compound interest of potential? Because if it says that faith is a substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, so potential is the compound interest of your faith. Because if you hope to achieve a certain thing, that means you're going to have to stay on it. You're going to have to the compound interest, because just like potential, like faith, we all know that that's the thing that's hoped for. But the difference between the compound interest of faith, because remember we talked about having access to borrowed capital. So what's the compound interest? As you do it more and more, as you put it to work, as you identify it, as you compound it and compact it, it grows into the greatest potential that it can ever be. So your potential is the compound interest of your faith. It is the evidence of things. Potential becomes the evidence of things. That's why you can look at a child, or you can look at something like, man, that guy has potential. I see it in him. I see the work that she does. I see the work that he does. I see the activities that they bring. I see how they move things. Because remember, we talked about earlier, we talked about being magnetic. Magnetic moves things. It draws in. All right. I ask you a question. Have you given yourself access to your potential? Like just giving yourself access to it. Because if you don't give yourself access to your potential, because remember earlier we talked about borrowed capital. Like you can't borrow from something that has nothing in it. You can't physically, mathematically. It's just like whatever the number is times 0 is equals what? 0. It is never going to add up. So when you give yourself access to your potential, you're giving yourself the capability of growth exponentially. Just by giving yourself access, just by forwarding yourself access. Because if not, then you're going to have insufficient funds that you can't pour back into you. It's like developing your recharge by leveraging the energy that you have, by empowering the potential that you have. And I guarantee you, when you empower your potential, After that, I guarantee you, your potential is going to allow you to leverage it like over and over and over again. Leverage that. Leverage your potential. And your potential is going to allow you to leverage it. All right. Man, I want y'all to be blessed. I want y'all to just write down what your potential is. Right? Write it down. Like, this is my potential. I have a potential of doing this. I have potential of doing that. But then on the other side, well, on the left side of the sheet, write down what your potential is. I want to potentially do this. I have potential to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then write down your skill sets. Write down, I can do this, or I do this, whatever it is, and figure out how can this get leveraged by your capital, like your access to your intellectual capital, your access to your spiritual capital, or your access to your emotional capital, whatever it is. How can this leverage that? If it can't, then that's not something that you could use to leverage it. You don't need to borrow from that capital. You need to borrow from the things that you know that's going to ultimately give you the most potential by leveraging it. All right, that's enough. Man, y'all be blessed. Hey, I know yesterday that the podcast went off, so tomorrow I'm going to redo yesterday's podcast. That technology won all day, so make sure you stay tuned. Yesterday's podcast was good. I couldn't even upload it because everything was toe up. So tomorrow I'm gonna redo yesterday's podcast about it. Yes, Miss Scott, have an amazing Tuesday. Peace. Good morning, Miss Teresa. Have an amazing Tuesday. For everybody that stayed on Instagram, y'all have an amazing Tuesday. And remember, here at Consistency is Currency, your morning podcast of choice. Y'all be blessed. And I'll see you tomorrow, 7:30. Peace.